Call a meeting to order. This is Rules and Open Government Committee meeting for March 13th, 2013. Any changes to our agenda order? None to consider. All right, let's turn to March 19th council agenda. On page 1, note that the 7 p.m. meeting was canceled last week. Anything on page 2 or 3? Item 1.3 was originally on the evening. That's been moved to another date.
It'll be on April 16th.
April 16th.
Yes.
It was originally deferred. Now we need to move it to April 16th. Is what we need to do. That's the commendation of the Association of Viet Arts. Anything else on page 2 or 3? Page 4 or 5. We're going to defer the Samsung matters until March 26th. Anything else on 4 or 5? Page 6 or 7? Nothing to talk about on 7 because that meeting's been canceled. I have a couple requests for additions. Councilor Campos travel to Pasadena for League of California Cities Transportation, et cetera, committee meeting, and Councilor Herrera's travel to Pasadena, also League of California Cities. Both of those are April 4th and 5th. And then I've got a recommendation of the city clerk to appoint John Adams to the Advisory Commission on Rents for a term expiring.
With the additions.
Second.
We have motion to approve with the changes and additions. Mr. Wall, do you want to speak?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. Item 4.1 seems to be in a deferred to the next agenda limbo. I'd like some discussion of why this issue, the agreements for the development of Samsung's Research and Development Center, is being constantly deferred. I mean, there has to be some serious issue with this deal that I think the public should be made aware of. I would also like the council to publicly thank the Finance Department for item number 9.1. They've done an outstanding job managing the bonds, and I would like to express my thanks to them at this time. Thank you.
That concludes public testimony. We have a motion to approve as amended. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. That's approved. Let's turn to the March 26th draft agenda. Anything on page 1? Page 2 or 3? Page 4 or 5? Item 3.3 is the March budget message. It looks like that's going to be heard immediately after the consent calendar, so it will be heard early in the meeting. I don't think there's anything on the consent calendar that needs to have that decision first. Since it's the March budget message, so I think that's an okay spot for it. Anything else on page 4 or 5? Anything on page 6 or 7? I've got a note that item 4.5, actions related to San Carlos Senior Apartment Project, we need to waive the 14-day sunshine.
Which item?
4.5, San Carlos Senior Apartments Project. Still make the 10-day rule?
Yes, we will make the Friday distribution.
Okay. Anything else on 6 or 7?
Mayor,
Councilor
I'd like to have that item deferred 1 week, 4.5.
That's a rough one.
To April 2nd?
April 9th.
April 9th. There's no meeting on April 2nd, so it'll be a 2-week.
Correct.
We wouldn't need a sunshine waiver. It's deferred for 2 weeks. But I don't know if there's a time issue with the deferral.
Do have a note here from staff indicating that the closing of the loan does become a bit of a time crunch. That said, this is the first time I've heard about that. So, just for your committee's information at this point.
Well, I just moved for the deferral of that item for this week, and if next week you want to come up to rules, if
good.
there's a true deadline, you'll let us know what it is.
Very good. Will do.
Bless you.
So in terms of the noticing for this meeting, if we take it off and say it's going to the next meeting, when the agenda comes out again, then we'd have a 10-day rule problem if we add it back next week. So it'd be better just to note that unless there's a good reason next week, we would defer it.
So I'm
To the
saying,
second.
Mayor, you're saying put it on the agenda, and then at next rules committee
Yeah,
meeting, it
just
could be deferred.
Leave it on there with
Okay.
a question about whether or not it really has to go,
Fair enough.
okay? Because then we'll find out if there's a time certain. I'm assuming the reason to delay it is because just why waive the, why do the sunshine waiver if you don't have to?
That as well as I've had zero update from staff.
Okay, so we'll just leave this on there, and then next week, the committee can take up that item.
Mayor, 4.6, just a note that is in response to yesterday's action. I don't know if we'll be ready in 2 weeks to come back to this meeting. We're working with staff, but it may be kicked until the April 9th meeting as well. But that's just, I'll let the Rules Committee know more
So
next
There'll
week.
be something else to
Yes.
consider next week. Okay. Anything on page 8 or 9? We have a grant application, item 5.1, on the Three Creeks Trail pedestrian bridge. We need a waiver of the 14-day rule on that.
Mayor?
Yes, anything else?
Yeah, 6.1 actions related to taxi permits at the airport. I think when we get a chance, perhaps we can talk about a time certain for that, or it could be a last item. I anticipate there will probably be folks coming down to speak on this item.
I think the last item would be good.
6.1, taxi permits. If we put that last, we can come back and pick a not earlier than time to put on it as well. Okay. Anything else on page 8 or 9? Page 10 or 11? I have no written requests for additions. So let's talk about the time certain spot for the taxi items. One question on that one is, does staff think they'll be ready to go?
I believe it is being heard by the Airport Commission the prior night, so we'll have some sense of the discussion. The memo, I believe, is already out. Okay,
So it'll be out soon, so,
it'll be out soon.
right.
Not before 2:45.
You think we'll be that quick?
No, 3 o'clock.
We were only off by 3 hours yesterday, no, 2 hours yesterday, one time we thought we'd start.
I say not before 3.
Actually, yeah, Mayor's budget.
Yeah, we have the budget
Yeah, we have the
message
budget
on.
message.
By
Go
3:30 then.
take
Yeah.
some action on that.
Also, we anticipate 3.4, the citywide security guard services may take some time, given there's a protest.
Not before 3:30. Four.
I think 3:30 will be fine on
Yeah.
that.
So it would be the last item.
Last
and-
item, not before 3:30.
Yep.
Can we wait until next week to pick that time, in case some of these things drop off that are in front of it? Rules Committee, I can adjust that time next week if we say, well, let's set it at not before 3 or something like that.
Or something gets added, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
things that do come up. So it would be not before 3:30, but we'll have to consider that next week to tighten it up perhaps. I have a request to speak on this agenda. Mr. Wall?
Sir, I would think you could put 5.1 on the consent calendar. On item 4.6, I want that just eliminated in its entirety. I'd like to see the city attorney take over control of the housing department. It deals with portfolios and contracts. They're very well adept at that. We heard testimony, they get $10 million a year from the portfolio, $6 million has to go out, or $7 million has to go out. I think it was $6 million. $4 million is left to play around with housing assistance. And I think the attorney's office would be far better served, and people far better served by having the attorney do it. I'm sick to death of what I saw yesterday, and I want to put an end to housing vagrants for free at taxpayers' expense. And 2.7, now when you look at this, finally we're getting some competent people at the Water Pollution Control Plant. I'd recommend to you, sir, that you direct the administration to eliminate, transfer, demote the director of ESD and the assistant director of ESD forthwith. Now, sir, we're playing with a lot of money here and a lot of competent, incompetent people in positions of authority, and I want that changed. I'm sick to death of what I've seen at ESD as well as the housing department. And, sir, you look at the other page on, what is it? Excuse me, 2.10. Look at that agreement. We need to discuss this further at TPAC, these items at TPAC, very thoroughly. And, sir, I just I'm fraught with distress at what I see that's going on under your administration. And I don't blame you personally, sir. What I do blame you is having you surround yourself with incompetent people, and that has to stop. Thank you.
That concludes public testimony. You have a motion to approve as amended.
Motion approved as amended.
Second?
On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. That's approved. Next item is upcoming study session agenda, March 18th, on the Green Vision implementation.
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion to approve. Mr. Wall?
Sir, I looked at the agenda, and there is no discussion concerning the reformulation of the sewer service and use charge. As I've spoken before, that sewer service and use charge is 37 years out of date, and there needs to be some form of discussion about the inclusion of residential flow meters for an accurate flow reading to the collection system to get an accurate charge for the sewer service and use charge as defined by Proposition 218. Thank you.
Includes public testimony. We have a motion to approve the agenda for the study session. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. That's
Quick
approved.
question, Mayor, on
Yes.
study session dates.
Yes.
Are we the day after Easter? I think it's Cesar Chavez, and then there's an April 2nd study session date. Is that staff feel that's going to be kept?
We have no pending items, so we would be able to release that date.
Should we just release that item now, that date?
April 2nd.
Yeah.
We have no items. It's going to be too late to put something on anyway of any significance. So we can go ahead and release it.
Okay.
Make a motion.
Motion to release the April 2nd date.
Second?
Motion is to release the April 2nd study session date. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. That's approved. Let's let the council members know that we've released it. Nothing on legislative update, state or federal. Meeting schedule we just talked about. Public record, anything the committee would like to pull for discussion? Mr. Wall, you want to speak?
Sir, on letter A, I personally did not like to write this letter. I have much respect for your dedication to this nation and service to this nation. But on TPAC, sir, you have permitted the city administration to appoint, via the city charter, incompetent administrators that have sat on their butts and not dealt with that money in the capital improvement program. And that is just not excusable, sir. I'm sorry about writing it. I don't like writing this type of letter, and I apologize for it, but I have to stand my ground. I know what's going on out at that Water Pollution Control Plant, and I don't like it. And you're the chairman of the Treatment Plant Advisory Committee, and you can wield a very poignant stick, and you have yet to raise it. And that bothers me, sir. Also on C. Now, I found out just by cursory research about, I think it's, Volume 8 of the United States Code, Section 1324, about harboring and shielding from detection illegal aliens. Now, I have to do a public record search to find the council directive to the police department that forbids them from contacting Immigration Customs Enforcement when they have a known illegal alien in custody that has violated something to be arrested justly. That bothers me too, sir, because that conduct, if it's reckless, and reckless disregard, and you're shielding illegal aliens by a ministerial act, does that rise to a felonious conduct? And I think council members should look into that and have the city attorney give directions on that, because I'm prepared to proceed under the Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organizations Act to put a stop to this. I'm sick and tired of gangbangers going to jail, and if they're illegals, they're getting released back into the community. I want these people gone, and that's part of this problem. Other than that, there's a letter from Mr. Truslow thanking our city clerk, and I don't see enough thanks from the council to our city clerk, who has stepped in and done a fine job, and I'd recommend her appointment to be permanent. Thank you.
That concludes public testimony. We have a motion to note and file the public record items on that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. That's approved. Taking us, we have nothing under boards, commissions, and committees, so we have some items to recommend, et cetera. We have first a request from Councilmember Camus for a District 10 Leadership Group Summit as a city event.
Second?
Motion is to approve that as a city-sponsored, council-sponsored event. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. That's approved. Item number 3 in that category is a proposal to modify the municipal code to have an ordinance prohibiting the riding of bicycles on over the age of 12 on sidewalks within the downtown core. Request from Councilmember Liccardo. You want to speak on that, Mr. Wall?
Yes, sir, and thank you. Councilmember Liccardo is correct with the framework of the bicycle issue, but this should be citywide. He erred in just giving the formulation for where he wants the bicycle ordinance to be applied. Furthermore, it should be, I'm not interested in signage, because there's no signage that say that you have to commit murder, so there's too much of the signage business going around, and that becomes blight. What I would like to see, a direction to the San Jose Police Department, if a police officer sees it and has time to enforce it, fine. But I also want the bail schedule for this to be excessive. I want it $500 to $1,000 violation. I want it to hurt, because I'll tell you something. I'm sitting out on a public sidewalk with safety cones in front of my house, pruning my roses, and bicyclists come by at an excessive speed, have run into my chair, and this irritates me greatly. So I want this citywide and at police officers' discretion, and also a very, very stiff fine. Thank you, sir.
Richard McCoy?
Wow.
Rich McCoy, Vice Chair of the Senior Commission. I want to thank Councilman Liccardo for his quick and decisive action on this measure, and I hope the board will approve it and will be able to enforce it. And I will agree with some of the things that Mr. Wall said, but it's a good movement. I think it'll really help out the seniors. Thank you.
That concludes public testimony. This is a request to refer this item to the Transportation and Environment Committee meeting of April 8th. To be discussed within the existing bike plan update agenda item already on the agenda. So my question is for staff is in terms of processing, assuming that the committee wants to move forward. This is an ordinance change. I don't know if it's a big one or a little one, or how it fits in the prioritization scheme of dealing with ordinances.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of the work, as the council member noted and you noted in the memo, it does make reference to an existing agenda item. Staff could look at this as that discussion being an initial scoping of how big an issue this would be, as you point out, both in terms of prioritization among ordinances, as well as trying to get our arms around the magnitude of outreach and whether enforcement would be an issue. We could use that committee meeting as an opportunity to have that initial discussion, and if it does appear to be a sizable undertaking, then would go to prioritization.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions or comments from the committee? Need a motion then?
Motion to add to the T&E committee?
Second.
Motion is to approve the request to refer it to the T&E committee for April 8th. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. That's approved. Item number 4 is a request from Councilmember Camus to agendize a grant of $500 to the Andres Cusseler Middle School Education Foundation. Following our policy that I think he's got some family connection to that, so the council has to approve the grant. I believe that's why the request is here, City
That's
Attorney.
correct.
Right, so there's no legal disqualifying interest, but I think in the appearance issue, as raised in the memo, the recommendation is to get the full council to act on it.
Motion to approve.
Motion is to approve for what agenda? Be on the consent calendar,
Yes.
26th?
Yeah.
Okay, 26th, the consent calendar. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. That's approved. Item 5 is a request from Councilmember Liccardo to direct the city manager to announce through an RFP or other standard public process available office space within City Hall with some recommendations on criteria. I have a couple of questions about that. I'm aware of a few thousand square feet not far from here in the wing that we've tried to peddle a time or two before unsuccessfully. Is there other space that staff knows about that we might be talking about?
I think really depending on the magnitude, the square footage of space needed, there have been, and I believe there still is, some area within the building. That said, we could look at also juggling some other city operations into those spaces as well. So I think that there's potential there, but it would be something that staff should take a look at.
Well, I'd like to know if they've got space that could generate some cash flow. That's always important, especially during the budget season. But in order to do that, I think we need to know how much space is there, what uses we're likely to make of it. If we're getting ready to move some people around, can we get them into the building, and those kind of all standard real estate stuff that I would like for staff to look at as we assess this. Never know when we can find a source of funding that we sorely need for a lot of things. I have some concern about the recommendation to specify organizations that might want to come into some space. It's probably premature to worry about it until we figure out if we've got space that we can make available. But I do not think I would want to have lobbyists or special interest groups or rent seekers or influence peddlers or agents of foreign governments. There's a whole host of people I wouldn't want riding up and down the elevator with city staff on a daily basis, and we'd have to think about that and whether or not we could restrict who we would lease it to. If we put it out for an RFP, who's going to show up? I don't want to see the lobbyists moving their offices into City Hall, and, why tempt them? So there's some of those issues that I think we'd have to work out. But first question is whether or not there's really any space that might fit the bill.
And
Vice
Mr. Mayor, there's also the age-old issue of private activities, since this building was financed with tax-exempt bonds, and the finance department would have to do that appropriate analysis. So that's just another potential issue out there that we'd have to go
Okay.
through.
Vice Mayor?
Well, I wanted to know if, Councilmember Liccardo is not here, but maybe Reagan, or if Councilmember Liccardo has spoken with staff about this, but has there been like a lot of interest from different organizations or companies or individuals that actually wanted to lease space here at City Hall? Just wanted to know sort of how did this come about, and where's the request coming from?
Hi, I'm Reagan with Councilmember Liccardo's office. So this actually started as a request from an agency that would like to have some small office space in City Hall, that their focus is economic development and bringing companies from Asia to Silicon Valley. And it's a agency that has been speaking with our Office of Economic Development already about the possibility of having a small amount of space. I'm talking a cubicle or two within City Hall.
Mm-hmm. So it's just one agency, or?
So far,
Yeah.
that's what our office has been working with.
Mayor?
Well, I would refer them to the International Market Access Center that's a block away, the Chamber of Commerce. They've got space that they could rent. But if people just want to have our address so they can put it on their cards and they can go to foreign countries and claim that they're somehow connected, I don't really want to encourage that. Councilmember Oliverio?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the general question, I'd be, refer this to staff, come back to rules, and just say what is the space available, whether it's square footage or a floor, and then what are the options for that? Do we have city staff at another building? We'd consolidate here and then release that building. I just don't know what that total is, and then we should figure that out. But to your point, we've had this wing over here that hasn't gone anywhere. I think in part due to a self-imposed regulation the council put on it. But, I think if we want to gather information to see what square footage is available, take a peek at it. And then, Mayor, in your conversations with the patent office, which is a public entity, I think part of the proposal was, hey, you're welcome to be actually in the City Hall. Was that correct? You already offered that?
Yes, they are another governmental agency. They're not going to take us up on that offer. They said, well, even to take free space, we'd have to do an RFP. And they've got space in the government GSA control space in Menlo Park that handles their short-term temporary needs. And then, of course, they're going through a formal RFP process for the 30 or 40,000 square feet that they need on a permanent basis, and there's buildings that they'll lease that in.
Well, if they include us in the RFP, they'll include us in the RFP. I know that there's some wackiness. Met someone who leased commercial real estate to a government agency, and they ended up, because of the RFP, they actually went with a place that was much, much higher per square footage for a variety of reasons done from the top down, and it sounded very silly as a waste of taxpayer money on that side, but certainly, and you've already had that discussion, so I'd like to see what space is actually available, and maybe it's the county that would be open or whatever. I mean, obviously public entities have less conflict to what questions you were bringing out earlier.
Right. One other thing that comes to mind, if we're talking real estate, is the cost of preparing the space for leasing, because that was part of the problem with the space next door. It's a cold shell. I think it was $2 million to bring it back up to where somebody could start their tenant improvements. If we were to lease part of one of the floors in our tower, you'd have to do tenant improvements to compartmentalize it or seal it off or bring in the wiring for internet access, et cetera. But I don't think we had to do that analysis. I think the first step is just figure out if there's any space that we think we might be able to let go for money.
And Mayor?
Yes.
And then, City Manager, my assumption was, the work of Matt Morley and others, that this was sort of something we're always looking at our city facilities and looking to see if they are optimized or where there's, extra space for whatever.
Right, we have done that on an ongoing basis, and so since it is a somewhat fluid issue, it'd certainly be time for us to take another look at it.
And when we look at the public safety infrastructure for the interoperability project, if we locate one of the cells here at City Hall, not only do you need the roof, but you need a secure location to put the infrastructure. And I imagine that would take up, essentially the size of a couple cubicles, and space would be made available for that because that's a public use.
Not familiar enough with equipment needs there, but certainly take your word for it in terms of requiring some space, whether it be otherwise leasable or back of house type area.
Sure, thank you.
So, staff, how long do you think it'd take for you to just do the real estate analysis in a couple of weeks, come back to rules in a couple of weeks, and we can talk about whether or not there's enough space available to make it worthwhile to proceed?
Certainly, be happy to.
Okay, so we'll just refer the staff to come back in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Yep.
Continue the conversation.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
motion is to refer it to staff, bring it back in 2 weeks. Mr. Wall, is this one you wanted to speak on?
Sir, I appreciate your legal analysis. I agree with it wholeheartedly with reference to lobbyists and other interlopers. Councilmember Liccardo was correct in raising the issue of what to do with the space, but he erred because this issue should have gone to the CED committee first and have the analysis done there instead of coming forward here and then trying to get the city manager to be burdened with this program. What bothers me also was the fact that there is already an agency lined up and it wasn't stated in the agenda. And this type of deal making, shall I say, is troublesome because it should have been out in the open. What agency, what are they doing? And I believe this agency could be classified as a lobbyist, in my opinion. And Mayor Reed is very wise to look at this issue from that standpoint. Councilmember Oliverio is correct about the interoperability network, but putting it too close to a street is unwise because it could be damaged. That thing should probably be located in a very secure place somewhere in the tower where it can be protected. I appreciate everything you've done about this issue, Mr. Mayor. I personally don't understand why City Hall doesn't have a cafeteria that serves really healthy foods, because we talk about the wellness program for city employees, but we just talk about it. We don't do anything about it. And I think if you had a cafeteria over there that provided really healthy foods, that would go a long way to bring people into City Hall, feed the employees that are here. I think you should look at that too. Thank you.
That concludes public testimony. We have a motion to refer it to staff. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. That's approved. Last item of business, open forum. Mr. Wall.
Sir, I want to ask your guidance and counsel, because I did not like being interrupted during the consent calendar discussion yesterday, and I do not have any form of argument with you because of my respect for your service to this nation. Now, when we discuss rules agenda on the consent calendar, that includes, from my perspective, the entire agenda for that rules meeting, which includes the public record. As you know, I've been writing for some time on the issue of Camp Chucksam, that homeless encampment that has gotten quite a lot of press lately. And in discussing that, it's also appropriate to integrate it with all other poignant issues that are on the agenda. So if I'm wrong, sir, I would like you to tell me that I'm wrong, and I will cease and desist and not talk about items that are on the public record that are a part of the rules agenda. Because, sir, I have too much respect for you to have arguments like this, like yesterday. I do not like that. I never want to have it again. And so therefore, I ask your guidance, because you're a very wise lawyer, and I beg for your guidance and counsel. Thank you.
That concludes the public comment at open forum, concludes our agenda. We're adjourned.